it's time now for debate with representatives of the three projects that have been presented in the previous session. They're going to be delving into the transforming role that projects such as down-to-earth, granular and rustic might have in local policies and regional policies, just to look at what works best with this type of initiatives, how to involve the various players involved, how to do things. So we have Isaías Calvo as the moderator from the Galician Agency for Rural Development. So I hand over the floor to him. Isaías, you have the floor. That's great. Thank you very much, Angela. First of all, let me thank the Rustic Project and Simone, who is here today with us, for holding this dissemination event, which is extremely useful. And I would like to greet all of you and the people who are following this online. And I would like to also thank Seuga for the organization of this event in this wonderful place at the Ribeira Sacra, near the valleys of the rivers Minho and Sil, which is a very beautiful part of Galicia, and it's always a pleasure to visit this part of Galicia. My name is Isaías Calvo. As Angela has said, I work for the Galician Agency for Rural Development, AGADER, which is run by the Galician government, and we are involved both in the Rustic project and the Down-to-Earth project. Also, we have here today with us Breixo Martins as a stakeholder in the Down-to-Earth project, so the granular contributions are going to be present too. So it's about finding positive synergies among these three projects. So let me welcome all of you to this wonderful panel with excellent panelists and with a wonderful audience too. So the debate that we're going to be engaging in is entitled From Living Labs to Multi-Actor Governance, Routes Towards Transformation and Policy Impact. So it's about determining how all of this can collaborate to transform governance in the rural areas, if this exists, if there is such a governance, and this is potentially something that can be modified, and whether there is a real impact that we can expect from this multi-actor approach that has been mentioned by the speakers who have taken the floor earlier today. We have three excellent panelists: Mariam Ferreira from the University of Santiago de Compostela, the campus of Lugo, who's been participating in the Rustic project, and then to her right there's Breixo Martins from the University of Vigo, who is in charge of the granular project, working with the ideas that have just been presented. And then we have Alfonso Ribas from the Juana de Vega Foundation, in charge of projects and with a participation in a lot of projects, and they are very rigorous in their work, so we're really grateful to them for that. So I'm going to hand over the floor to you for you to introduce yourselves, and then we can just delve into the topics of the debate. So as Isaías has said, my name is Mariam Ferreira Golpe. I work as a researcher at the University of Santiago de Compostela at the Lugo campus, more in particular. Thanks for highlighting that, since we have two campuses at the University of Santiago de Compostela, and I've been working for some years now in projects that apply this multi-actor approach. As Isaías has said, I'm working in the Rustic project, and I've previously worked with projects such as the Sherpa project, and we have some people here today who participated in the Sherpa project, and that multi-actor structure that used to be called MAP and that is now called Live and Lab. So I thank them very much for attending this session. And of course, I invite them to please take the floor whenever they feel suit and to tell us about their experiences, which I'm sure are going to be very interesting. My name is Breixo Martins. I am a researcher at the University of Vigo, campus of Orense. We have 3 campuses. And despite the fact that we haven't got any preferences in terms of campuses, but of course, if you want to work in rural development and things that related to rural areas, you need to go to the Orense campus. So I'm working in the Living Lab project together with Maria Doval. We are in charge of a Living Lab, and we also are in charge of a thing that I think is very interesting, which is the cross-sectional visits that are very interesting because we could focus on the compared needs and goals in the rural areas of Europe, and this gives us some perspective in terms of the capacity of cooperation that the various players have all around Europe, and also the differences in approaches and the territorial differences that we have. Together with these projects, we have another range of projects that are always related to the rural areas, or with a great rural component, and we generate synergies through these projects, and we are very thankful to the organizers of this session for inviting us to be here today. Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to be here today. My name is Alfonso Ribas. I work for the Juana de Vega Foundation as Director of Research and Innovation. I have a PhD from the University of Santiago de Compostela, the Department of Economy. I worked for the university, then worked for the Galician government for 11 years. I was in charge of agricultural research. So they've asked me to, I've worked with participation for many years now and a number of different projects. So we at the Juana de Vega Foundation, we've been working with a number of different projects, but our ultimate goal is always to involve communities, to encourage the public participation, and to support the agricultural, the farming sector, the rural sector. Thank you. This is an open debate, of course. The speakers, the panelists that are sitting by my side are going to be taking part, of course, but you are more than invited and more than welcome to also participate from the audience whenever you want, really. So just raise your hand, whether you are online or presentially here, and just make the comments that you find appropriate. Okay, you've talked about the various types of rural areas in Europe, and based on that diversity, we can say that it is actually difficult to, set up living labs and implement this multi-actor approach. How do we do that? How can we develop such an approach in a way such that we can actually encompass all of the actors that we actually need? So I just bring this question to the table for whoever wants to answer, including the audience. I think that living labs and multi-actor projects, at the end of the day, well, they are developed from Europe just with the goal to adapting public policies to the various territorial contexts. And this is one of the bases why these type of projects are implemented. It's different. The contexts are different, very different, as a matter of fact. And often we have the opportunity to work in a number of different places, and we can see that the institutional component and the institutional structures are very different. So I think that is one of the important topics of all of this.
I think that one important factor when it comes to ensuring that the living labs are diverse and representative of the various realities that we can find, the first thing that we should do is to identify the sectors that need to be compared. This is one of the most important factors at hand. Who do we invite to participate? This means that when we are going to create one of these structures, depending on the places and the topics that we're going to be dealing with, we need to invite a community or, a specific community. This is connected to the identification of these key players that are going to ensure that this work is going to be conducted with representative staff or representative people. We can also try and make the most of existing groups or players that are well known, at least in that place or that theme they're going to be dealing with, that can help us complete that first process of identification of players or actors. And if we are talking about how to make living labs representative, it's important that we focus on the groups that do not have a voice. For us to identify the minority groups that are not there more often than not. So we need to define, to determine why they are absent and what we need to do to actually reach them and to give them a voice. So what we can do is probably to use different mechanisms to reach these groups. Compared to the mechanisms that we normally use. So we need to find new mechanisms for this. Something that I said in a previous meeting with stakeholders within the framework of the Down to Earth project is that it's important to work with local partners, but we need to keep in mind at all times that we need to reach the final users at all times. And I mean the farmer who has a farm and not just the president of the association representing 500 farmers whose work is to attend this type of events. I'm not saying that they don't represent their members, the members of the associations, but more often than not, there are many things that we're not aware of, things from the daily life, we're not in contact with the final users. And I think that you are totally right when you say that it is difficult. We need to maybe change the discourse, change the format, change the image even. This is something that we talk about very often, the importance of image with a view to reaching these users. But going back to living labs as components of all of this, I think that they are very important because they're not only useful for new rural policies, but it is also useful they are also useful to give a voice to players who are not going to be represented or directly represented in the European context, so that they feel that they've been also included in the European process. Next week, I have to go to the 6th event of the Rural Parliament, the European Rural Parliament is going to be held in Scotland. So we said that we didn't want to bring big actors, representatives of small villages. We're going to go there with 2 mayors of small villages and another couple of representatives from this type of villages. So this is the people we're going to go to Scotland with. What we want to do is to foster that type of representation. So this generates identity. It's also useful for the development of new policies. Well, it is actually true that the intention behind all of these living labs is to make small settlements participate, but it's very costly, we have to say. It's very hard, and we need to place an emphasis on that. But here in Galicia, even, councils, town councils are very small. So for them to actually participate in this type of initiatives and for them to have the staff necessary to be taking part in this type of initiatives, and this is difficult. More often than not, they haven't got that skilled staff, and there are people who are dealing with many different topics, and more often than not, we include them in this type of structures, and then they are not there. They don't attend meetings. So just for formal reasons, we have a multi-actor concept, but at the end of the day, the reality is not that multi-actor. So either we have organizations or bodies with people who are there for that, I mean, to take part in this type of sessions. And this is why I think both the European Union and the regional government and the national governments should establish, I don't know, some compensatory payments or some other tools so that this type of small communities can actually participate. I think that participation is very important. We have a lot of experience in public participation projects. We do a lot of these in the sense that Mariam said of mapping all of the sectors and working with all of them. But we can see that people are willing to do that. I mean, I just came back from Costa Rica. There were cocoa producers, for example, who traveled for 8 hours to attend a meeting. So this is something that you need to respect. I mean, they got up at 2 in the morning to attend a meeting that was being held in the morning. So we need to foster the mechanisms to make that possible. Well, just to quantify what you're saying, which is totally right, we at the Granular Project are in charge of coordinating all of the visits of local partners of all of the living labs. We have held 4 events now. So far, I mean, like 1 week long events, and today the indicators that we have are not very good because the local partners are not really participating because we're managing to make them attend these visits. So it's quite hard, actually, or at least it's been hard for us to motivate these people, to get these people involved. And that contact with the territory is something that I think that we do have, and this is probably why we are being successful to a certain extent. But then you might have people who haven't got really a contact with the territory, and at the end of the day, the impacts are the ones that we already know. As Medium has already said, these minority voices, absent voices, well, at the same time, they can take a very weak stance, or their position can be very weak because we have well, relations of power in these communities and in this type of initiatives. On the other hand, it's also very interesting what Alfonso said, that there is a will to participate. I can mention different things that we've done in Dantereth and Rustic that require the participation of 70% of landowners, and people actually get involved. There is an involvement, therefore, an active participation, because this is about people's land, and since there is a great attachment to land, we could say here in Galicia, as it's been said before, well, you have to keep this in mind. But maybe we're leaving aside the voices that are less heard, and probably we need to try and, well, keep this in mind to go ahead with projects and for projects to go ahead. So how can we cast a little bit of light on all of this, considering the relations, the power relations, and so on and so forth that we have in the rural areas? How do you do that? Well, that's a good question. It's one of the challenges that we have when we work with this type of structures. Maybe if we are to listen to those voices that are not there on a normal basis, apart from identifying them and trying to determine why they're not participating, we need to think that in a parallel way, we can establish mechanisms that are not just about the participation in structures such as a living lab, just to listen to those people. It can be work with smaller groups, or even if they're very interested and we see that we don't reach a specific sector, well, we can conduct individual interviews, for example. We would have a more formal, a more permanent structure with this living lab, with the actors that we have identified and that have agreed to participate. And if we think that there is a problem of these unheard voices and things that are of fundamental importance for a project to be successful, then we need to try and find new tools that can be developed in a parallel way. Maybe these groups do not want to attend a session like today's, but you can actually approach them and talk to them if it's possible. Of course, we're going to be debating a lot here today, but I'm afraid that we're not going to find a solution for every single problem or for all of them. Well, the fact that they don't understand does not mean that they are, I mean, that they agree. So, well, what do you think about that? Well, the question is actually very timely for me because it was asked to me 5 minutes ago during the coffee break. So for me, this is a very important issue in terms of, I mean, it's a matter of planning also to a great extent. We can't just share some time with the actors once every 6 months. We need to plan things. We need to, for example, organize an event and try to get them involved. So you send them the ideas, the strategies expected to be implemented so that they feel involved in the event. And then you publish an output after the event, and then you organize another event to present that output. And then you send every 3 months, every 2 months, you send them information and suggestions of activities and the results of the different events that you're organizing. So this might sound like a human management issue. It's a planning issue, really. You need to plan things 1 year in advance for everything to, to be okay. So what we can do is to forget about interacting with these actors in the meantime for a whole year, for example, because then the progress that we might have made is going to fade away. I think that people participate when they think that there's going to be a result of that participation coming out of that participation. This is like Little Red Riding Hood and the Wolf. If I take part in different processes of participation that are going nowhere, then I end up being disappointed with this type of activity. So there is this participation, governance, or these two concepts are strongly linked. So we need to reinforce governance. This is for this participation to be really useful. So I think that this is one of the keys for people to actually see the use of taking part in this kind of initiatives. Of course, this is being tackled from different perspectives. That's definitely so. So then we need to apply this, and we expect this to be done. And we all then need that feedback also, the feedback with the people participating, and just let them know about, well, that process and how it is advancing. We have seen very clearly throughout the last few years in the participation processes that we are clear about the fact that this is very obvious, and also the fact that solutions are that there are collective solutions, there are governmental solutions. We've seen this with the wildfires recently. I might have a clean forest, but if everything else around it is not well managed, then I'm going to have a problem also. So at the end of the day, these multi-actor, multi-participation processes are very important because all of us have to participate to try and find solutions for the problems that we share as a society. I mean, this is something that needs to be solved jointly. So I think that we still have to convey this spirit of participation to the governance, and that this is going to transform the possibilities of the people have, and that the solutions that are being demanded are actually met. So if we get people involved, then we have a lot of actors on the ground to decide what we're going to do. It's impossible to reach any type of agreement that enables you to actually function well, and this leads to stalemate. It's not easy for people to agree on something. And you talk about people with, for example, common interests with democratic participatory systems. And in spite of all of that, we can't find solutions. We can't reach solutions. So we need to try and find other ways to do things. Have we got any question? Yeah, there seems to be one question from the audience. Please go ahead. Can you hear me? My name is Anadam, and I cooperate with Action Against Hunger, which is an NGO, Acción contra a Fame, and I work as a rural dynamizer within the framework of the project that we are developing, which is called Communities of Employment and Sustainable Rural Entrepreneurship. We have created learning communities that stem from a participatory mindset. I mean, from the challenges that we're going to be facing and to the actions that are going to be implemented. The examples, well, we've been working on this project since January 24, and as specific examples of communities, we have the Sustainable Rural Tourism Community of the Ribeira Sacra, and we have the participation of all types of companies related to tourism in the Ribeira Sacra and other actors, governmental accents. Also, we have another learning community in the village of A Estrada, between the provinces of A Coruña and Pontevedra, that is about an entrepreneurship. It's called Deza Tabeiros Entrepreneurship Project. I'm going to give you two insights. Breixo has mentioned planning. I can't plan a year in advance because it's not me, the person who tells people what is going to happen. It's them telling me what they want for it to happen. So more than planning, I would like to talk about follow-up. I can't just stop following these things up, communicating permanently. And regarding what Alfonso said, I think it's very important to actually deliver results to a greater or lesser extent. They're looking for things that give them reasons to go back to their following meeting. We are not here to waste our time, regardless of how nice the name of a project is. So in our case, the tourism learning community asked for our help, for them to create a powerful, robust brand, and for them to create complete packages encompassing a number of different proposals. This is for them to be able to offer much better tourist offer. The people from Estrada ask for specific training, accompaniment, ideas for them to sell more, contact networks, visibility. The next stage is going to be to create an entrepreneurship fair in Estrada. So as an example, this would be like a good example of participation in our experience. So thank you for organizing this event, which is very enriching, and including in our projects the figure of the rural dynamizer, because I think that we are key, we are catalysts, because we know how to listen to people. Thank you very much, Anna. I hope that projects continue being very successful and that turn out to be fruitful. People are not here to waste their time. This is what she said. This is something that we say very often also. So I totally agree with both Alfonso and Anna that you have to present results. So you make something, and you need for that to be useful for some things. It's not just about the results. It's also about the fact that before we get started with it, we need to be aware of the of what we want, because more often than not, we start creating something that we call for them to participate are not very clear about the fact that this, I mean, what is the goal behind this project? If they haven't got this information, they're not going to get involved. It's going to be much harder because they're investing a lot of time. I mean, a lot of work. It's not just about having a result, it's also about the fact that we need to know what we're doing things in advance. Sorry about that. Well, I think that we are always trying to do the same type of things, trying to reach tangible results and solutions for the specific problems of the rural areas. And knowing what these problems are, well, it's about the demands of the society. I mean, we need to listen to the society and we need to give them solutions. But it's not always easy because often us from the world of ideas, as I call it, we, I don't know, maybe detect a need for a community, but the community does not feel like they need that. So through debate, we can reach some common ground and just see that there are needs on both sides and maybe in different time frames. So with different time frames, maybe we can see that a time frame would be 10 years, for example, but there are colleagues who would say if we haven't got a result next year, this is never going to be successful, this is never going to be fruitful. This might be true or not. We might have another type of results in 10 years' time. So we need to make these things compatible because, of course, we have our activity, our daily activity that does not depend on the deadlines of the public administration, which might be much longer.
So talking about what you were mentioning before, living labs is an approach that goes from the bottom to the top and the other way around. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but we have the role of the administration, which looks like a huge element that is unable of playing that role. So you are thinking about a constant participation, monitoring, and sensitiveness to listen and know how to draw conclusions from what people are telling us in the field. How do you see that role? It's the time to start fighting against the administration. Well, they are different roles, different spaces, times that are linked, and all of them are necessary. So we can have different initiatives that will mean nothing in the future. So I think that the administration, or at least the people who are in the administration, and they have their sensitiveness within the administration, as Tania was mentioning before. And I think that there are different stakeholders also there. We are finding sensitiveness in that sense. The same line, I've been working for a long time in European projects. My name is Ted, and I wanted to mention that the governance and political changes are making it hard to really prove the changes. How can you involve people if you can promise a result in 10 years? If the political change will mean that it's obsolete. So sometimes the process among legislations, which is what the small stakeholders are looking for, cannot meet the demands in the short term, which is when they need it. Obviously, it's hard. I think we should include small incentives in the projects, and many times they cannot depend on the administration because it's too slow. But the society can also do good things that are good for the communities without having the administration involved and trying to take the administration towards these changes. Sometimes it takes them time to react. In these living labs, we test public policies with case studies, with data. Sometimes policies are not based on data. They are there because somebody thought about them and a policy was launched, but there is nobody in the administration analyzing the results of that policy or really monitoring the results. So they just continue with that policy year after year. And with a budget, I've been in the administration where it's impossible to create a new budget saying we're going to allocate resources to this or to that, and it's not the case. I have 50 million in this line and I still have that, but that's for that line only. So it's a huge problem. Those are improvements that need to be implemented, but it's complicated. We are not criticizing completely the administration. What Breixo said, they are people, they are different institutions, they have goodwill, but sometimes the structure is too complex. Yes, it's about how we translate the results of the living labs into specific policies that can be implemented, and sometimes we find that it has a rigid nature. There are restrictions linked to the guarantees of some rights times that make it very hard, and you need to respect the deadlines. But it's about trying to find a connection. How can we translate the results of the living labs that we have been developing into policies? We have the results of the living lab. How is this going to translate it into specific policies? It's not easy at all. No, it's not easy. And we need to think that the work that we conduct in the living labs is about very specific topics that then need to be translated into a general legislation. So not just that people participate and see the results and they are heard. Probably the policy translated from that project is not going to be exactly what they had been talking about. Policies are for general realities. This is something you can see, especially in higher authorities. So we need to find a balance between the conclusions of the living lab and how that is translated into the policies, and also the deadlines. People may be thinking they are not heard. Sometimes we don't speak the same language. The public, they don't speak the same language as the administration, and we need to translate that. Sometimes it's not just that we don't agree, but we are not using the same language. So it's a very complicated process. There are many things that need to be considered. I was talking about planning. She was talking about monitoring, my colleague here. And I think that both words are important, because for us, planning is essential. We need to plan the monitoring process also. But we are already seeing differences in language here, the way we see or implement things. To give you a specific example, these two phases or visions can be implemented this way. In the project that we are about to start, based on this project, it will start in December. It's a project based on data that we have, and there are two stages. A very real and specific one that has to be implemented in 30 months. We have 50,000 euros to pay for remote assistance in case of environmental risks. So we have to buy them, we have to give them to the users, we need to train them, and they have to implement it in the territory, and I need data in 30 months. All people who are receiving this service will have it in 30 months. That's something completely tangible. In this case, the administration, based on that, on the data received after 30 months, 30 months, they will have to change the strategy, the coordination among the different administrations. And they need to involve other administrations that are dealing, for example, with environmental issues. This is going to take maybe 5 years. So we can have a new legislation in 5 years. So these are two different stages, but they are tangible in both cases. Yes, the complexity of this translation is amazing. If we cannot translate these living labs into specific policies, it looks like they are useless. Why all these efforts if there is no repercussion afterwards? Maybe we are doing something wrong, but if we are doing it right and the living labs have the power to change policies, maybe then we should use them as a tool to change policies. Is this something that you consider feasible? For example, for the agricultural common policies. Do you think that's something we could do? Well, maybe that's one of the problems, that we are changing policies every day. Maybe we don't need to change policies that much. We don't have a long-term planning. We are seeing that the most successful models around the world are countries that plan in the long term, at least in the economic level. So I think that many of these results of the living labs, it's hard to implement them. Well, they are big changes maybe, but then there are other small changes that just need to be published in the Galician official gazette. They are small things, it's not that hard. Maybe a long-term policy, or even the CAP is something that will take more time. For example, a farmer can say, I used to be paid for this, now they don't pay me for that anymore. So these are problems that the sector has. And maybe there is an excess of legislation here. So maybe what we need to do is simplify policies, plan in the long term, and have instruments that can reflect these changes in an agile way. I also believe that living labs are supposed to inform about new policies and assess old ones. They can also have another function. As we are talking about governance, it looks like we are forgetting the role of governance improvement, even at local level, that these structures can have. We have not assessed the living labs yet, but we have done it in other projects, considering the success of these types of tools. And one of the things valued by people participating in these structures is the network that they create with new contacts, or they strengthen the ones they already had. So they are very happy to talk to people with other perspectives. They are forced to think, to open their mindset, the way they understand the rural environment, and that work together also helps them, to the extent that sometimes when these structures are wonderful, we get as a side effect that initiatives are implemented in those places as a result of this project. So I think this is also something that we should stress, that improvement of the local governance. We're always talking about rural areas that have a problem of governance. So this could be another tool to improve that governance. Yes, I agree with both things. And maybe those who think about the short term are going to complain. How can we change the environmental problem that we have in Galician forests? Well, we need 20 years to improve the productive system. We need to change several things. So it's going to take 20 years. So we need a policy now that in 20 years, it doesn't have to be exactly the same, but it has to follow the same logic. So we need to have a long-term vision. And in general, somebody from a common law country, for example, would go crazy with all the legislation that we have here. And what you said, living labs are very useful. I think they can contribute to the creation of new policies, but in my opinion, the capacity to create networks and learning from each other, not just at local level, but also, because our work in the rural area is about coordinating the local stakeholders of all the European living labs. But for me, it's very important that the mayor of Volterra sits with the one of San Juan de Rio and they talk about the case in San Ciencio. So here we are in Volterra and Valdecechina. We have this strategy, and the other one says, well, in my experience, in this other area, it's very different, and I think it's not going to work for you. So I think that has a very added value, and it would be impossible to exchange these experiences among mayors of small villages without these projects. For me, the participation and creation of networks and local governance, as we were mentioning before, are essential. And sometimes it's hard. Recently, we presented this initiative called Greenship to coordinate local stakeholders and promote entrepreneurship in bioeconomy. So we are working in this territory, 5 different entities, and we have to be coordinated, or it will be impossible for people to coordinate if we are not coordinated. People will be listening to us, and if we have a different speech, it makes no sense. So what's the problem when reinforcing governance at local level is that we are very small. Companies that are small, farms are small, administrations have not many resources. So it's not about us not working enough. I think we work a lot, but the structures are not good enough. And that's the problem. I was in this event in Dublin, and I asked a guy from Frankhofen, and I said, how many are you in your institution? 200. And he said, we are 30,000. Well, you can see the difference. I'm going to give the floor, knowing that size matters. I'm going to give the floor now to Beatriz. Yes, concerning the role that living labs can play for the public administrations, I wanted to stress the role that can be played in the long-term strategic planning, which is something that we are not doing. Policies are, they take 4 years, and we have the experience of Sherpa, which was a living lab that many people here participated in. And what we did in the living lab was a exercise about where we want to be in 15 years. So we decided where we want to be, and based on that, we established the intermediate steps. So from a political point of view, that helps you to plan something that is not going to be obsolete in the future. So they can be very useful, but you need to be willing to assume the results of the living lab. If you are part of that, you need to assume the results. For example, in the case of Sherpa, it was one of the projects that fed all the recommendations that were used to create the Rural Pact that should now be translated into policies. But this is something that needs or requires that we establish some steps. So here in Galicia, a group of 20 people made specific recommendations, and we facilitated that living lab, and the political policy recommendations came from them. We digested the results. They gave us their policy recommendations, and we just completed them. And at some point, we will start seeing specific results, but at least they are part of the Rural Pact. And something else that Breixo mentioned, and I think we can play an important role there, is the policy assessment. We are not doing that. We think about recommendations, but we are not critically assessing the policies. And a living lab for that would be wonderful, because this is something we are not doing here. If you are not assessing the policies, you don't know what you can improve or what you need. So I think that's another role that can be played by living labs, not just as professionals, but also because the city is the one assessing and the one that is affected by the policies that we make. So the public are they are the best to give their opinion, right? I'm going to also mention some of the comments that we can read online. They say that these are processes that are not looking for immediate results, but about learning while we do. Working on the landscape means also working on people, relationships, rhythms, agreements, and governance appears from this shared practice. Also, Carla Ferreira says that it's necessary to have clear objectives and generate an actual governance space to work together on real problems and establish an action plan to implement all of this. So these are some of the comments that we have in the chat, and I think we should move now to the conclusions of the debate. Well, I would like to thank, of course, the interventions of the audience. And I have some notes here about what we were mentioning. So results. We need to have clear objectives. The different stakeholders need to play different roles, and they need to complement each other as far as possible. Alfonso talked about incentives. We don't have much time to talk about that, but they are very interesting. And also the difficulty of translating those living labs into policies. So I think that the contribution of Beatriz is very interesting. We need to plan in advance and apply a scientific criterion to the policies. We see if they work. If they don't work, we forget about it. And if they work, we keep working on it. But you know that politics, sometimes they don't work like that. But it's hard. I also like the idea of a actual governance space to share those ideas. And I think I can give you the floor for some closing statements. They have 1 minute each, no more. And let's finish with that. Very briefly, I believe that the multi-stakeholder approach is very useful. And I think that one of the ways of improving this approach is and getting results that are satisfying for everybody is learning, sharing among us what we learn every time that we elaborate one of these structures. I would like to thank the audience for their opinions because they lead to discussion, which is why we are here. And I believe that's the actual value of Living Labs, that we can talk to the people, assess different aspects, assess policies with data, because we have the academia assessing data from policies. They present them to a general group of stakeholders, and then we get conclusions, statistic conclusions that are scientifically elaborated, and then they are presented. So I think that the actual value of the Living Labs is to change the future of the European territory. As Isaías said, the assessment of public policies is very important. And at Down to Earth, we are working with Agave in a project for a digital model. So some of the data that we get from these participatory processes can be available for that assessment of public policies in some way. We are working on it, and we will see in some months if we make it. Well, thank you very much. A round of applause for our colleagues.